This video and its narration were crafted using advanced artificial intelligence to bring historical events to life through cinematic visuals and storytelling. We invite you to watch with a respectful and positive spirit. While we rely on real records to reconstruct these tragedies, the artistic interpretations serve to honor the lost. Please support our channel as we preserve the memory of those who rest beneath the waves. Our journey into the deep is a tribute to the human spirit and history, blending modern technology with a prayerful heart to ensure that the stories of the fallen are never truly forgotten. In the quiet depths of the Red Sea lies a silent steel giant, a massive British merchant vessel known as the SS Thistlegorm, which has rested in its watery grave for over 80 long years. Once a vital lifeline for the Allied forces during the height of World War II, this ship now serves as a haunting underwater museum, preserving an entire army's worth of equipment in the darkness. October 1941 brought a deceptive calm to the waters of safe Anchorage F, where the Thistlegorm sat heavily loaded with motorcycles, trucks, and ammunition destined for the Desert War in North Africa's heat. The crew believed they were hidden from the prying eyes of the Luftwaffe, tucked away in a remote corner of the sea, yet destiny had a far more violent plan for unhung brave sailors. Among the young men on board was 22-year-old Arthur Barclay, a dedicated crewman who carried a small wooden doll in his footlocker, a precious gift intended for his younger sister back home in England. Arthur had promised his family that he would return safely with treasures from his travels, never imagining that his final journey would end in a midnight massacre beneath the stars of the Egyptian coast. At 1:30 in the morning, the silence was shattered by the drone of German Heinkel bombers, their pilot searching for a target in the moonlight before spotting the dark silhouette of the anchored British freighter. A single, catastrophic explosion ripped through the ship's midsection, detonating the massive store of ammunition in cargo hold 4 and sending a pillar of fire climbing high into the cold, black night sky of October. The force of the blast was so immense that it tore the steel hull in two, hurling massive steam locomotives off the deck and into the air before they sank forever into the desert sand. 9 men perished in those terrifying moments of fire and smoke, including young Arthur, who was last seen struggling to reach the lower decks as the seawater began its relentless surge into the dying vessel. Now, our ROV glides slowly toward the jagged remains of the stern, its powerful lights cutting through the murky depths to reveal the rusted anti-aircraft gun that still points toward the surface in defiance. The camera moves over the corroded deck plates, where thick layers of silt and marine growth have claimed the machinery that was once meant to change the course of history on the African battlefields. We descend into the darkness of the forward holds, where rows of BSA motorcycles stand in perfect formation, their rubber tires still remarkably intact after decades of submersion in the salt-heavy waters of the sea. It is an eerie sight to witness these mechanical ghosts, frozen in time and covered in a fine dust of marine snow, waiting for riders who will never come to claim them from the deep. Our robotic arm brushes aside a cloud of sediment to reveal a stack of Lee Enfield rifles, their wooden stocks rotting away to expose the cold, pitted steel that once served as a soldier's protection. The silence inside the hold is heavy with the weight of lost potential, as we realize that each piece of cargo represents the labor and hope of a nation at war, now utterly abandoned. We search for any sign of Arthur's presence, steering the submersible through a narrow breach in the bulkhead where the crew's personal quarters were once located before the sea claimed their intimate, private world. The light illuminates a shattered wooden trunk, its lid torn away by the pressure of the sinking, scattering fragments of clothing and personal belongings across the silt-covered floor of the small, cramped cabin space. Somewhere beneath this debris lies the wooden doll Arthur bought for his sister, a simple toy that has become a tragic monument to a brother's love and a promise that remain tragically unfulfilled forever. The ROV's lens focuses on a pair of rubber boots half buried in the mud, their shape a haunting reminder of the men who stood their ground while the ship groaned and died around their feet. We move deeper into the labyrinth of twisted metal, passing by a row of Bedford trucks whose windshields have long since shattered, leaving their empty cabs to be explored by curious fish and scavengers. The visual contrast between the instruments of death and the vulnerability of the human heart is overwhelming as we document the decay of this once mighty floating fortress of the British Merchant Navy. Every rusted bolt and bent railing tells a story of the sudden violence that ended the Thistlegorm's mission, turning a vital supply run into a permanent memorial for the 9 souls lost that night. Our sensors detect the swaying of soft corals that have attached themselves to the ship's structure, life finding a way to bloom amidst the ruins of a war that the world has mostly moved past. We paused the expedition near a cluster of shattered crates, where thousands of rounds of ammunition lie spilled like metallic grain, a reminder of the explosive power that once resided within this metal hull. The current tugs gently at the ROV, mimicking the restless spirits that might still wander these silent corridors, guarding the secrets of the Red Sea's most famous and tragic underwater military graveyard site. As we explore the outer debris field, we encounter the ghost-like silhouette of a steam locomotive, standing perfectly upright on the seabed as if it were still waiting on a track in a London station. The sheer scale of the destruction becomes clear when we see how far these massive iron engines were thrown by the blast, a testament to the raw energy that consumed the ship in seconds. We return our focus to the interior, where the ROV navigates past a collapsed bulkhead to find a small, rusted crucifix still clinging to a wall, a symbol of faith in a time of terror. The machine-led exploration allows us to witness these details without disturbing the sanctity of the site, honoring the dead by documenting their final environment with the utmost care and professional documentary precision. The water here is thick with history, a mixture of salt, rust, and the intangible memories of a generation that faced the darkness of global conflict with courage and a sense of duty. Our lights catch the glint of a brass instrument panel, its needles frozen at the exact moment the Thistlegorm lost power and began its final, agonizing descent into the cold embrace of the sea. We think of Arthur Barclay reaching for his footlocker, his hands trembling as the deck tilted beneath him, driven by the simple desire to save a gift for a child he loved so dearly. The tragedy of his loss is magnified by the stillness of the wreck, where time has stopped but the evidence of his final struggle remains etched in the very layout of the debris. As the ROV moves toward the engine room, the massive pistons and gears appear like the bones of a prehistoric beast, forever silenced by the overwhelming weight of the ocean's heavy and dark pressure. We observe a small school of fish darting through the open hatchways, their silver scales reflecting our lights as they make a home among the ruins of man's most violent and destructive historical inventions. The floor of the bridge is covered in a thick carpet of silt, hiding the charts and logs that once guided this vessel through dangerous waters toward its intended destination in the north. We imagine the captain's final commands echoing through these spaces, drowned out by the roar of the fire and the scream of the incoming bombers that sealed the fate of everyone on board. The camera pans across a row of universal carriers, their tracked wheels half submerged in the sand, looking like miniature tanks ready for a battle that would never take place on the desert plains. There is a profound sense of waste in these holds, not just of material goods, but of the human effort and life energy that went into preparing this massive arsenal for the war effort. The ROV hovers over a collection of porcelain plates, some still stacked neatly despite the violence of the sinking, a domestic touch that feels strangely out of place among the guns and the trucks. We find a fragment of a uniform jacket, its brass buttons dull but still recognizable, caught on a jagged piece of metal near the entrance to the galley where the crew once shared meals. This exploration is more than just a search for metal and machinery, it is a search for the heartbeat of the men who lived, laughed, and died within these now silent and corroded steel walls. The light of the submersible reveals the intricate patterns of rustic glass hanging from the ceiling like frozen tears, a natural phenomenon that adds to the sorrowful beauty of this sunken and broken. We proceed with caution, mindful that we are trespassing in a graveyard where the peace of the fallen must be respected above all other considerations during our machine-led journey into the past events. The shadow of the ship looms large over the seabed, a dark mountain of steel that serves as a landmark for sailors and a warning of the high cost of human conflict across the globe. We look for the doll again, hoping to find a glimpse of the carved wood that Arthur cherished, knowing that its discovery would provide a bridge to the man he was before the tragedy. The silt is deep here, and we must be careful not to stir up a cloud that would obscure the history we are trying so hard to capture for the world to see and remember. Our ROV's thrusters kick up a small puff of sand, revealing a hidden layer of personal effects that have been buried since that fateful night in 1941 when the world changed forever. We see a broken pocket watch, its hands missing, a perfect metaphor for the way time has ceased to function for the 9 men who remain here as permanent guardians of the Red Sea. The machine-led perspective provides a clinical yet emotional view of the wreck, allowing us to see the small details that a human diver might miss in the rush of a limited air supply. We witness the slow reclamation of the ship by the ocean, as nature weaves its own story over the metal, turning a site of death into a thriving reef for countless marine species today. The anti-aircraft gun at the stern remains our primary landmark, its barrel encrusted with barnacles and coral, a weapon of war now transformed into a perch for the colorful fish of the sea. We move toward the breach where the torpedo or bomb struck, a gaping wound in the ship's side that reveals the true power of the explosion that ended the Thistlegorm's short, brave life. The twisted girders look like broken ribs, and we can almost feel the agony of the ship as it was torn apart by the very ammunition it was carrying to help others survive. Arthur's story remains our guiding light, a personal thread that connects us to the vast and impersonal machinery of war that surrounds us in every direction within these dark, flooded cargo holds. We imagine him looking at the doll one last time, perhaps tucking it into his jacket for safekeeping before the water rushed in to claim him and the treasures he hoped to bring. The ROV glides over a row of crates containing thousands of spare parts for the trucks, each one meticulously labeled and packed, now rendered useless by the passage of time and the salt. We find a small devotional card, its image of a saint barely visible through the grime, a reminder that many of these men turned to their faith as the end drew near and dark. The atmosphere of the wreck is one of heavy solemnity, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath in honor of the sacrifice made by those who served on this ill-fated merchant vessel. We record the way the light plays off the rusted surfaces, creating a cinematic landscape of shadows and highlights that emphasize the dramatic and tragic nature of this world-famous underwater archaeological site. The camera captures a lone crab crawling across a motorcycle seat, a small sign of life in a place that was once defined by the sudden and violent arrival of death from the skies. We are reminded that history is not just about dates and battles, but about the individuals like Arthur Barkley who lived through those moments and left behind a legacy of love and duty. The ROV continues its slow patrol, its batteries humming quietly as we document every inch of the debris field for the benefit of those who want to understand the true cost of war. We see a collection of glass bottles, some still sealed, containing the liquid of a bygone era that will never be tasted or enjoyed by the men who purchased them so long ago. The scale of the War Museum is truly staggering, as we realize that the loss of this single ship had a significant impact on the logistics of the entire North African campaign during 1941. We pause to reflect on the bravery of the merchant mariners, who sailed through dangerous waters without the protection of a heavy navy, knowing that every voyage could be their very last one. Our lights flicker momentarily, casting long, dancing shadows across the hold that make the rows of motorcycles appear to move, as if they are preparing to roll off the ship and away. The tragedy of the Thistlegorm is a story of betrayal by the very anchorage that was supposed to be safe, a reminder that in war, there is no such thing as a true sanctuary. We prepare to move into the next phase of our exploration, knowing that the deepest secrets of the wreck are still waiting to be discovered in the lower levels and the dark corners. The ROV rises slightly, giving us a wide-angle view of the split hull, a sight that never fails to inspire a sense of awe and deep sadness for the violence of the ship's end. We close this chapter of our journey with a final look at the stern, where the names of the lost are written in the rust and the silence of the Red Sea's depths. Our ROV pushes deeper into the cavernous belly of the Thistlegorm, where the shadows of the past seem to dance within the beams of our powerful lights, illuminating a graveyard of forgotten British engineering. We navigate through a narrow gap in the twisted metal of Cargo Hold 2, where the sediment lies undisturbed like a shroud of gray velvet over the rows of trucks and motorcycles below us. The camera lens captures the haunting sight of a Bedford truck, its engine long ago silenced by the salt and pressure, yet its headlights still seem to peer into the dark abyss ahead. Among the cargo, we see the handlebars of BSA motorcycles poking through the silt, their leather seats rotted away to reveal the cold, skeletal frames that once carried young men across the sands. It is a chilling realization that these machines were never meant to see the bottom of the Red Sea, but were intended to fuel the fire of a desert war thousands of miles away. Crates of ammunition are stacked high against the bulkheads, their wooden slats swollen and bursting from the internal pressure of the gunpowder and the external weight of the heavy, cold seawater surrounding them. We glide past thousands of Lee Enfield rifles, their steel barrels glinting with a dull, rusted sheen as the light of our submersible reflects off the weapons that were once a soldier's only true companion. The sheer volume of the War Museum is staggering, a testament to the immense scale of the conflict that consumed the lives of so many young men like Arthur Barkley during the mid-20th century. A large moray eel emerges from a broken crate of grenades, its serpent-like body winding through the instruments of destruction as if it were the new and rightful guardian of this submerged and silent arsenal. The presence of marine life amidst the wreckage provides a stark contrast to the violence of the ship's end, reminding us that nature will always reclaim what man has lost to the deep sea. We steer the ROV toward the crew's communal spaces, searching for the echoes of Arthur's daily life before the bombers arrive to shatter the peace of safe anchorage F in the early morning hours. The mess deck is a scene of utter chaos, with tables and benches tossed aside by the force of the explosion, now covered in a thick layer of fine silt and colorful sea anemones. Our sensors detect the faint outline of a porcelain teapot, resting upright on a shelf as if it were still waiting to serve a warm drink to a tired sailor during a midnight watch. These domestic details bring the tragedy home, transforming the Thistlegorm from a mere shipwreck into a place where real men lived, laughed, and planned for a future that was taken away too soon. We think of Arthur sitting in this very space, perhaps writing a letter to his sister or checking on the wooden doll he had carefully tucked away in his small, private footlocker nearby. The camera moves slowly over a scattered pile of rubber boots, their shape still holding the form of the feet that once wore them as the crew fought to save their burning, dying ship. We notice a fragment of a tropical uniform caught in a jagged piece of steel, its fabric frayed and bleached by the salt but still a tangible connection to the identity of the fallen. The ROV's light catches a small, circular object in the mud, which upon closer inspection reveals itself to be a brass uniform button embossed with the insignia of the British Merchant Navy's brave sailors. Every small discovery feels like a sacred encounter, a chance to acknowledge the humanity of those who became the permanent residents of this underwater tomb following the catastrophic events of 1941's night. We move toward the area where the explosion was most violent, seeing the massive hull plates peeled back like paper, revealing the raw power of the fire that consumed the ship's central cargo hold. The twisted girders and scorched metal serve as a silent witness to the midnight massacre, moment when the silence of the sea was broken by the roar of planes and the thunder of explosions. Beneath a pile of collapsed deck beams, we spot the wheel of a Bren gun carrier, its heavy tracks half buried in the silt as if it were still trying to climb out of the dark. The debris field is vast, stretching out across the sandy floor like a trail of breadcrumbs that leads us deeper into the story of the Thistlegorm and the men who called it home. We observe a school of glassfish hovering near a broken porthole, their transparent bodies catching the light as they dart in and out of the rusted frame like ghosts of the sailors themselves. The submersible descends further into the lower holds, where the darkness is absolute and the air in our lungs feels heavy even as we watch from the safety of our surface control station. Here, the sediment is deeper, hiding the secrets of the ship beneath a blanket of time that has remained undisturbed for over 8 decades of silence in the Red Sea's dark and cold depths. We use the ROV's mechanical arm to gently clear a small patch of mud, revealing a stack of Lee Enfield rifles that look as though they could still fire if only a hand could reach them. The sight of these weapons, packed and ready for a war that has long since passed, is a somber reminder of the industrial scale of human conflict and the lives it demands as payment. We find a small leather satchel, its strap broken and its contents likely dissolved by the water, yet its presence speaks of a person who once carried it with purpose through these metal corridors. Every object we encounter is a piece of a larger puzzle, a story of sacrifice and duty that we are privileged to document with the respect and solemnity that such a grave site deserves. The ROV navigates past a cluster of fire extinguishers that were never used, their red paint still visible through the rust, a poignant symbol of the futility of the crew's struggle against the flame. We approach a section of the hull where the name of the ship was once painted, now obscured by layers of barnacles and soft coral that have turned the steel into a reef. The ship's bell is missing, perhaps taken by an earlier visitor or buried deep in the wreckage, but its silent voice still seems to echo through the empty spaces of the engine room. We see a rusted wrench lying on the floor plates, dropped by a mechanic like Arthur in the heat of his final moments as he worked to keep the ship's heart beating against time. These tools of the trade are a direct link to the workers of the Merchant Navy, the unsung heroes who kept the supply lines open during the darkest days of the global conflict. The submersible exits the hull and glides over the white sand toward the distant silhouette of the locomotives, which stand like stone monuments in a desert that has been drowned by the sea. These massive steam engines, the Stanier Class 8F locomotives, were blown clean off the deck by the force of the ammunition blast, a feat of physics that defies the imagination of even today's engineers. Standing upright and proud on the seabed, they look as though they are waiting for a phantom engineer to stoke their fires and lead them on a journey through the silent, underwater world. The coal tenders lie nearby, their iron sides buckled and torn, scattering chunks of fossil fuel across the sand like black diamonds that will never be used to power the engines of war. It is a surreal landscape, a forest of iron and steel rising from the ocean floor, marking the spot where the Thistlegorm's journey ended in a violent flash of fire and falling metal. We circle one of the locomotives, noting the way the fish use its heavy wheels as shelter, finding a new purpose for these machines in the ecosystem that has developed around the wreck. The light of our ROV illuminates the fine details of the engine's construction, from the rivets on the boiler to the heavy iron pistons that once drove it forward with such immense power. Returning to the main wreck, we follow a trail of scattered motorcycle parts that leads us toward the shattered stern, where the ship's defensive gun still keeps its lonely and perpetual underwater watch. The 4.7-inch gun is a massive piece of artillery, its barrel encrusted with life, yet its presence reminds us that this merchant ship was also a warrior in its own right. We observe a large lionfish hovering near the breech of the gun, its elegant fins contrasting with the brutal purpose of the machine it has chosen as its primary and most royal throne. The stern section is tilted at a precarious angle, a result of the ship breaking apart as it sank, creating a dramatic and disorienting environment for our ROV to explore with great care. We see the massive propeller half buried in the sand, its bronze blade still sharp and clear of the rust that has consumed the rest of the ship's iron and steel structural components. The sight of the propeller is a reminder of the ship's movement and life, a symbol of the thousands of miles it traveled before reaching this final and tragic resting place in the sea. We steer our camera toward a small opening in the stern, where we can see the remains of the crew's steering gear, now locked in a permanent position that reflects their final efforts. Every turn of the ROV reveals a new layer of the story, a new piece of evidence that helps us reconstruct the final minutes of the Thistlegorm and the men who sailed her. We think of the 9 men who were lost, their names etched in the history of the sea, and we feel the weight of our responsibility to tell their story with dignity and respect. The darkness of the deep is not empty, it is filled with the presence of those who came before us, and whose legacy we are now witnessing through the lens of our camera. We find a stack of wooden crates that have remained remarkably intact, their labels still legible enough to identify them as containing medical supplies for the army fighting in the North African desert. The thought of these life-saving medicines sitting at the bottom of the sea while men died on the battlefield is a bitter irony that underscores the true tragedy of the ship's loss. We move back toward the midsection, where the devastation is most apparent, and where we hope to find more personal traces of the young sailor Arthur Barkley and his missing wooden doll. Our ROV glides over a pile of debris that was once the ship's galley, where we see shattered plates and mugs that were used during the final meal the crew shared together. Among the broken pottery, we spot a small silver spoon, its surface tarnished but still recognizable as a piece of home that a sailor might have kept as a small personal luxury. These small, intimate objects are what connect us most deeply to the tragedy, reminding us that every name on the list of the lost was a person with a life and loves. We imagine Arthur's voice echoing in this space, his laughter joined by his shipmates as they shared stories of their families and the lives they hoped to return to after the war. The silence that now fills the galley is a heavy contrast to the life that once thrived here, a reminder of how quickly a moment of peace can be turned into tragedy. We use the submersible's high-definition camera to zoom in on a small, dark object wedged behind a rusted pipe, which appears to be a leather-bound diary or perhaps a small personal Bible. Though its pages are surely ruined by the decades of saltwater, its presence is a testament to the inner life of the sailors who sought comfort and meaning in the midst of conflict. We pause our exploration for a moment of quiet reflection, honoring the space as a grave and acknowledging the sacred nature of the artifacts we are documenting for the world to see. The ROV's lights illuminate a patch of sea anemones that have grown over a pile of rifle barrels, their soft tentacles waving in the current like a floral tribute to the fallen. We move toward the lower deck of Cargo Hold 1, where the air is still and the silt is undisturbed, creating a sense of being in a time capsule that has opened. Here, the rows of BSA motorcycles are even more perfectly preserved, their metal frames gleaming in our lights as if they were waiting for their riders to return and start their engines. We can almost hear the roar of the engines and the shouting of orders, sounds that were replaced in an instant by the scream of the bombers and the roar of fire. Our search for Arthur's footlocker continues, as we navigate through the labyrinth of trucks and crates, looking for the specific area where the young crewman spent his final moments of life. We find a group of lockers that have been crushed by the weight of the deck above, their metal doors twisted and torn, spilling their secrets into the mud and the dark. Among the spilled items, we see a fragment of a photograph, its image long since faded to a ghostly white, but still representing a memory that someone held dear until the very end. Every piece of evidence we find is a prayer for the lost, a way of saying that they are not forgotten and that their sacrifice still matters to us in the present. We notice a small, carved piece of wood protruding from the silt near a crushed locker, and our hearts race as we realize it might be a part of Arthur's doll. The ROV moves closer, its camera focusing on the intricate details of the carving, which have survived the decades beneath the sea with a remarkable and heartbreaking level of preservation and grace. It is a moment of profound discovery, a connection across time that brings the story of Arthur Barkley and his sister into sharp and painful focus for everyone who is watching this. We prepare to document this find with the greatest care, knowing that it represents the very heart of the human story that lies at the center of the Thistlegorm's tragic and silent end. The ROV's mechanical arm extends with surgical precision toward the silt, where the carved wooden doll lies partially revealed, its delicate features still visible despite the decades of salt and silent isolation. We hover in the breathless silence of the cargo hold, realizing that this small toy is the most powerful piece of evidence we have found, representing a brother's love and a sacred promise. The camera zooms in on the doll's tiny painted eyes, which seem to gaze back at us from 1941, a haunting reminder of the simple life Arthur Barkley left behind in England. Near the doll, we find a fragment of a wool sweater, its fibers matted with sediment and sea life, likely belonging to the young man who died trying to save his only precious memories. It is a moment of deep emotional connection across time, as our robotic sensors detect the fragility of the wood against the crushing weight of the ocean that has claimed this entire ship. The silt around the footlocker is thick and undisturbed, suggesting that Arthur was alone in his final struggle to retrieve this gift before the darkness of the sea finally rushed in to stay. We move our lights to illuminate the surrounding debris, finding the remains of a personal letter, its ink long ago washed away, leaving only a ghostly white parchment buried in the mud. The contrast between the cold machinery of war and this delicate wooden toy is overwhelming, highlighting the vulnerability of the men who were caught in the crossfire of a global and violent conflict. Arthur's final moments are etched into the very layout of this cabin, where he chose love over survival, a choice that has turned this rusted hold into a shrine of human devotion. We imagine him kneeling here as the ship groaned and tilted, his hands reaching for the one thing that connected him to his family and the world he hoped to see once again. The heavy steel doors above us are twisted and jammed, a permanent seal that has kept these personal artifacts safe from the currents and the prying eyes of the world for 80 years. This cargo hold has become a sacred chamber, where the tools of destruction are outshined by the presence of a single, small object that speaks of a heart that never stopped loving. We record the exact coordinates of the discovery with the utmost professional care, ensuring that Arthur's story is documented with the dignity and historical respect that his sacrifice so clearly deserves. The doll will remain here in the silence, a permanent resident of the Thistlegorm, serving as a memorial to all the brothers and sons who never made it back to their families. Our mission is to witness and remember, and as the ROV begins to back away, the light lingers on the doll one last time, a beacon of hope in the dark abyss. We steer the submersible toward the bridge, where the ship's steering wheel remains locked in a final, desperate turn towards safety that was never reached by the brave crew on that night. The bridge is a skeletal ruin, its wooden flooring gone, leaving only the iron beams and the pedestals of the instruments that once guided the Thistlegorm through the treacherous waters of the sea. We find the remains of a brass telescope, its lens cracked and clouded by the salt, which once searched the horizon for the very bombers that would eventually bring the ship's end. Each broken glass fragment on the floor reflects the beam of our light, creating a shimmering mosaic of tragedy that honors the men who stood watch until the very last terrifying moment. The captain's chair sits empty and encrusted with barnacles, a lonely throne in a kingdom of rust that serves as a testament to the weight of command and the cost of duty. We offer a silent prayer for the 9 souls who rest here, asking that they may find the peace that eluded them during the fire and chaos of the midnight bombing raid. The ocean has transformed this site of violence into a place of quiet reflection, where the scars of war are slowly being covered by the soft, colorful growth of the living reef. We see a small, silver crucifix tangled in the wiring of a communications panel, a symbol of the faith that many of these sailors carried as their only shield against the unknown. Its beads glint with a soft light, reminding us that even in the deepest darkness, there is a spark of the divine that can never be extinguished by the waters of the deep. This simple object of faith is a bridge to the spiritual lives of the crew, a reminder that they were men of hope and prayer who faced their destiny with quiet courage. We reflect on the mercy that God may have shown to those caught in the explosion, and we pray that their transition from this life to the next was swift and gentle. The Thistlegorm is no longer a vessel of war, but a cathedral of memory, where the silence is as loud as a choir singing for the rest and dignity of the fallen. It is a place where we are reminded of our own mortality and the importance of the love we leave behind, just as Arthur left his mark through a simple wooden carving. We observe the way the current moves through the open hatches, like a slow and rhythmic breath that keeps the memory of the ship alive for all who seek to understand. The Bedford trucks in the hold are now home to colonies of small fish, their rusted cabins providing shelter and life to a new generation of creatures in the Red Sea. Their engines, once meant for the heat of the desert, are now cooled by the eternal waters, becoming the foundation for a thriving ecosystem that celebrates the persistence of the natural world. We move toward the split in the hull where the ammunition exploded, a jagged scar that remains the most visceral evidence of the ship's sudden and violent passage into the dark underworld. The metal is curled outward like the petals of a dark flower, frozen in the moment of its greatest agony and serving as a warning against the destructive power of human conflict. We see the remains of a Bren gun carrier, its tracks twisted into impossible shapes, a testament to the raw energy that tore through the ship and scattered its cargo like toys. The force of the blast was enough to end lives in an instant, yet we find beauty in the way the sea has softened the edges of the tragedy with time and growth. Yet, in the midst of the destruction, we find a small copper kettle, its surface still smooth, a domestic comfort that survived the fire and the fall to remain here forever. These artifacts are the true treasures of the Thistlegorm, more valuable than the guns and the gold, because they carry the essence of the people who once called this ship home. We record the silent beauty of a sea fan growing from the barrel of a rifle, a powerful image of life blooming from the tools of death in this underwater graveyard. The current carries a cloud of marine snow past our lens, making it feel as though we are moving through a dream or a memory that is slowly fading into the distance. We move past the anti-aircraft gun on the stern, its barrel tilted upward as if still waiting for an enemy that has long ago vanished from the skies of the Red Sea. It stands as a lonely guardian over the debris field, a symbol of the ship's defiance and the bravery of the men who stayed at their posts until the very end. We think of the families in England who waited for news that never came, and the sisters who never received the gifts their brothers had promised to bring back from the journey. For 80 years, this ship has kept its secrets, but today we bring them to the light, ensuring that the names of the 9 sailors are remembered with honor and deep respect. We ask for peace to descend upon this site, and for the souls of the fallen to be held in the loving embrace of the Creator as they rest in their silent tomb. The light of our ROV begins to dim as we prepare to ascend, casting long shadows that stretch across the sand like the reaching hands of the past calling to us tonight. We see a school of barracuda circling the mast, their silver bodies reflecting the last of our artificial light, a regal procession for the ship that will never sail again. Life and death are woven together in the fabric of the Thistlegorm, creating a story that is as much about the endurance of the soul as it is about the ship. We document a final sweep of the forward deck, where the tethers and chains lie like sleeping snakes, no longer needed to hold the ship to the world above the waves. The rifles in the crates are now pillars of rust, their purpose forgotten by the sea, but their presence still heavy with the weight of the war they were meant for. We see the beauty in the decay, the way the iron is returning to the earth, completing a cycle of life and loss that began on a dark night in October. Arthur's story is just one of many that lie buried here, but it is the one that has touched our hearts the most, reminding us of the power of a promise kept. We honor his memory and the memory of his shipmates, leaving them to the quiet of the deep where the world cannot reach them with its noise and its wars. The wooden doll is a tiny monument to a love that survived a bomb and a sinking, a small piece of home that will stay with Arthur for all eternity. We retreat slowly from the hold, our thrusters creating a gentle cloud of silt that settles over the artifacts, hiding them once again from the eyes of the modern world. The darkness begins to swallow the wreck as we rise toward the surface, the outline of the Thistlegorm becoming a shadow against the deep blue of the Red Sea's cold depths. We leave the cargo holds behind, carrying with us the images of the motorcycles, the trucks, and the doll, which we will share with the world to keep the memory alive. The Thistlegorm fades into a silhouette, a sleeping giant of the deep that will continue to guard its treasures and its ghosts for as long as the ocean remains in place. We look back at the bubbles rising from our submersible, like prayers ascending to the heavens from the depths of a grave that has become a place of profound history. It remains a monument to the British Merchant Navy, a force of brave men who carried the weight of the world on their shoulders during the darkest days of global conflict. We pray that the souls of the 9 sailors have found the harbor they were searching for, and that they are now safe from the storms and the fires of war. May they find comfort in the knowledge that their story is being told with love, and that their sacrifice is recognized by a world that still values their bravery and duty. The Red Sea holds many mysteries, but the Thistlegorm is its most moving and tragic, a time capsule of a generation that gave everything for the sake of the future. We are grateful for the technology that allows us to visit this sacred site without disturbing its peace, and for the opportunity to document the history of the sunken arsenal. Our journey through the War Museum has taught us about the cost of conflict, but it has also taught us about the resilience of the human spirit and its love. We remember the names of the lost, from the youngest crewman to the most experienced sailor, and we hold them in our thoughts as we return to the light above. Each man was a hero in his own right, facing the dangers of the sea and the sky with a sense of duty that should never be forgotten by those who follow. The silence of the sea is the ultimate tribute to their bravery, a quiet that honors their rest and protects their memory from the passage of the long and lonely years. We hope this exploration brings a sense of closure to those who still remember the Thistlegorm, and a sense of wonder to those who are seeing it for the first time. The Thistlegorm will forever be a part of the sea, a rusted crown on the head of the ocean floor that reminds us of the fragility and beauty of human life. We turn our cameras toward the light of the sun, which is beginning to penetrate the upper layers of the water, guiding us back to the world of the living. The surface light is a welcome sight, but a part of our hearts remains below with Arthur and his doll, in the quiet and the dark of the secret arsenal. We carry the story of the Thistlegorm with us, a weight of history and a light of hope that we will pass on to all who listen and watch today. May the 9 sailors rest in eternal peace, and may the waters of the Red Sea always be a gentle blanket for their tired and brave and weary souls tonight. As the submersible's lights fade into the distance, the ship returns to the shadows, a silent guardian of history and a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. May God bless the memory of those who serve on the merchant seas, and may the silence of this deep sea grave always be a place of peace, reflection, and eternal, holy honor.